somewhat lost in the hype of Brimstone Sands is that New World created a new player experience, and it actually may be the most important part of this update, at least long term.
Yeah, this is pretty, like, this is
They put in work. Oh,
a great sword.
Hell yes. Wait, is New World fun?
All these sailors join our cause. Soon, it will be all of humanity.
Okay. Does it have a story? Oh shit. It's Castle. Is it actually a fully fleshed out game with like unique zones? Well, kind of. New World's patch brought a lot of new things to the game. The Brimstone Sands, the Greatsword, all kinds of different exciting things for endgame players, and that's probably a big part of why we have fresh start servers coming on November 2nd. But the new player experience is the start of something new, and I think it was one of the things that may have been the most necessary for New World to fix when you're thinking long term about the game. Because if your new player experience sucks in a new MMO, in any MMO, you are going to quickly drive players away. There is a reason why New World is revamping their new player experience and why Lord of the Rings Online is revamping their new player experience. Because it is the first impression you get of the game, and if it's shit, people will leave. It doesn't matter how amazing your end game is if you cannot keep the player for the first 10 to 30 hours. Now, there's lessons from history of games putting too much emphasis on the new player experience. Age of Conan is one of those games that had this incredible, wonderful new player experience, and then the rest of the game was kind of shit. So there's got to be some balance. You don't want to leave players with these expectations that a good experience that they get in the beginning is going to continue throughout the life of the game, and then just not live up to that standard. And that's, I think, where New World may struggle here going forward, but that's a subject for another video. Now, I have played New World on and off since its launch about a year ago, and I wanted to give this an honest try. I created a new character, I had my friend join me, and we jumped into the new player experience to see what it was like, what we could get from this game. And honestly, we both had some pretty low expectations, and we were a bit surprised.
What have you done? The source. It was my destiny to claim that.
Let's start with the positives and go from there. I started in the same location as my friend, which was a welcome shift from how we were often separated at random at first launch. And this was shortly after, like, I had already experienced some of the new ways that the game was going to be introducing story to you. Little scenes that would pop up as you were playing through the game, little short audio cues. Grouping didn't feel like a hindrance because quest objectives updated together. I didn't feel like it was a bad thing to have my friend join me as we duoed through things. This has been a major gripe of mine in older games that actively make it worse to group with others for quests, specifically for quests, with respawnable items or kills that don't count together. Now, New World kind of does this with some harvesting. You cannot both harvest the same thing, and I believe that's to keep the resource scarcity. But other than that, it kind of works out that you have a quest item, they have a quest item. You have a kill, they have a kill. It works. The story was engaging and interesting. I found that I cared about the characters, which was new for me in New World. I wanted to know more about them, and the fact that the same cast kept appearing and each seemed to have their own distinct personality was more in line with games like Guild Wars 2 and Final Fantasy XIV, though obviously not on the same level. It's a great start to a more engaging world narrative with memorable characters. This was one of my biggest gripes when I did my first impressions of the game a year ago. I didn't give a fuck about any NPC at all. They could have just not existed in the world and it wouldn't have been that different for me. If it had just been giant exclamation points, it would have felt the same, because the characters felt dry and uninspired. I found more interesting lore by going to a little cliff and reading about how someone got locked in an outhouse, which that lore is still there, by the way. But that's not what happened in this new first experience. I actually remember some of the characters, and like now we have this.
Oh, who's this?
How?
Did you see my court?
Oh my god.
The wilds of Eternum have never been safe. But the
What the
roads? Never seen
Yeah,
anything
that's
like
a
this
voice.
before today. Vicious balls came out of nowhere. Ate all me truffles.
No. Why is the voice that way?
Yeah.
Which is a good segue into the voice acting. The voice acting, I guess, was memorable. I think that's one way to put it. The voice acting was an interesting change of pace though, because when New World first launched, you had partial voice acting in most of the quests. You had like they would start to talk and then they would deviate, and sometimes the quest text didn't even line up with the voice lines. And now with this, at least in the new player experience to the main quest and some side quests, you had fully voiced characters. The variation of accents and speaking really set the tone for this game. This is an island where time goes on, but cultures from all across time and geography have landed, separated by hundreds, if not thousands of years. But I guess luckily they all speak English. So yeah, kind of like every villain has a British accent. It's interesting. The way they introduced weapon types was fun, and I appreciate that we were all given the full range of choices rather than having to level up sword and shield needlessly. You could just go and find different weapons all across the ground, and then if you missed them, there's kind of a backup to that because throughout the main quest, you get all different types of weapon types given to you. So you get upgrades to what you may have picked up, or you get the item that you may have missed. So you can actually like test out and try the different weapon types without putting too much investment into it, like with crafting and things like that. But there's an issue with that, but we'll get to that again in the negatives. Leveling was a bit fast for these low levels, but I guess that's kind of to be expected. I'm not sure New World has figured out pacing just yet. Leveling seems to quickly slow down, but it feels very fast at the beginning. I mean, after all, I still have not maxed out my main character, but part of that could just be the awful quests that are outside of the main story quests just being uninteresting and making me not want to do it, so all I really do is go harvest and kill things. But that's not the case here. Speaking of quests, the quests in this new player experiences were diverse. We fought a boss with ads, we set off explosives, we had an escort quest, we had fetch and gather quests, and on top of the diversity of the quest, the actual narrative had interesting twists in the quest. Granted, some twists were less surprising than others. I mean, come on, we're gonna get his coat at the completion of this quest? He's not gonna be fit and healthy in the mine. Why would we get his coat? Because he's just friendly and wants to give us the coat? The foreshadowing here was a little much, but with positives come negatives. So I gotta at least tell you the negatives that I experienced when doing the New World new player experience. I was constantly waiting for the floor to fall out, for the game to return to its old formula, which was functional but bland and boring, and felt much more like a grind than an unfurling story. And that's kind of what will eventually happen, unless they continue with this revamp and take the revamp all the way through from where it is to Brimstone Sands. And while this may sound funny as a negative, it's very solo friendly. Even a duo, we felt so overpowered. There were no adjustments or tuning that made it seem necessary or even rewarding to play this MMO with friends. The multiplayer part of the massive seems to have been left on the curb, which is not uncommon in a lot of modern MMOs, but it felt especially keen in this game because everything was it was already easy and it made it even easier. While it was easy to group up, there wasn't a whole lot of incentive to. I felt disincentivized to do other things in the game as well, like very integral part of the games like harvesting and crafting. I didn't feel bereft of gear, and the quests that did engage you in harvesting or crafting to introduce you to the mechanics were very brief or they were side quests. With how the harvesting and crafting systems work in this game, I can see many New World players going through the new player experience and being dumped into the rest of the game with critically low harvesting and crafting skills, and perhaps even not complete understanding of them. Or the same could be said about PvP because there's no context for PvP in this story either. It's again where I kind of feel like New World is trying to be too many things. They're trying to be a crafting and harvesting survival game. They're trying to be a PvP game with territory control. and they're trying to be a story-driven single-player type MMO. They kind of need to pick a lane. And so far, the single-player part of it in this new player experience, that was kind of working in a lot of ways. I don't know. It kind of still feels like New World is suffering their identity crisis, and it's getting worse and better at the same time. And on the subject of the narrative, side quests were interesting, but the main quests were so rewarding and focused, I didn't really feel the need to do any side quests. Now, I'm not saying that this should be like filler. Final Fantasy XIV realized after years that all of their filler side quests that you had to do in between points of the main story were kind of frustrating to players. But the alternative is this, where the main story is so rewarding, especially in experience, that you don't really have to do any side quests. So they might as well not be there. And finally, my biggest gripe, my biggest negative for me anyway, is that it's too fucking easy. And I'm not good at most games. I mean, you can watch the gameplay footage on screen and you can kind of tell that I'm not very good. There you Void Gauntlet plus Blunderbuss. Oh shit. Am I stuck? Am I stuck?
You seem stuck.
Shit.
You type like slash unstuck or something?
Oh god.
What does right clicking the Void
stuck?
Gauntlet even do?
But it was just easy. Not just as a duo, but solo too. New World already has very light death penalties. They have unrealistically low fall damage, and the NPCs, unless wildly over level or elites, are a joke. Honestly, the most dangerous thing that I have experienced in New World is either other players or the water. If the goal of New World is to be soloable by anyone, I understand why they're so easy, but some kind of tuning or quest difficulty selections, like Lord of the Rings Online is adding with the delving system, would go a long way in making the game more fun. At least for me, when a game is too easy, it feels kind of like a chore. Like I'm just ticking things off a list because I'm not thinking about the game. I'm not really focused at all. I might as well be watching Netflix on another screen. The balance, in my opinion, hasn't been struck here between being too hard to be frustrating and too easy to be boring. Boss battles that several quests had built up to were over in seconds, which was extremely disappointing and diluted the narrative as my goggle-wearing half-clothed self went on a rampage destroying battle-hardened knights with ease. So those are my thoughts on the new world, new player experience. Why are there so many news? Overall, I'd say I'm pleasantly surprised, but that's also probably because I had very low expectations. I did not enjoy the new player experience when I first played New World. I think when I first played, the most impressive things to me were sound design, lighting, and the combat felt like fun. And those were the things I stuck with. I enjoyed harvesting and crafting. I hated the quests. I thought the quests were bland and uninspired. And it seems like what they've done here is they've kind of taken their biggest weakness and attacked it. And apart from that, one of the things I didn't really get into is there's a lot more feel to the world with the castles and the different types of zones and NPC types that we got to see. It felt like their art team actually did a lot more work in the intervening year, and I hope this all continues. I hope this is just the beginning for New World. I hope that we get more and more updates like this with new adjustments to zones to make them feel more unique and not so similar. There's so many places where it kind of feels like a copy and paste with a little bit of tweaking, and I would really like to see them really just breathe some more life into the world and make it feel different. Make it feel different, not just in the colors of the zone or the fact that this zone has snow, but make the actual fortresses and things like that feel different. I feel like a lot of times you're not seeing it as an MMO, but seeing it as this is a territory that could be taken over by a player, and so it has to be similar. And so those kind of things, I think, limited the design. I could be completely wrong, but that's just the feeling that I'm getting. All that said, I still feel like the new player experience here was good. I think that they did a good job, and I want to see them continue. I enjoyed my time. I enjoyed playing New World. I enjoyed this new experience that was really brought me into the story. And when I saw the twist that I didn't want to include in this video so you can experience it too, I was like, oh wow, really? Like it actually, like I had that moment of, hey, this story is interesting enough that I was so into it that I'm shocked that this is happening. And it's not to say it's like some incredible narrative twist that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life, but it's still fun. It was a good idea, and I like that they have put so much work into it. New World is a game that I have been watching to see. They had their boom and they busted, and then what would happen? Would they give up on it, or would they continue to work at it? I feel like New World can have a place in the MMO genre and continue to thrive as long as they just keep working at it. My name is Redbeard Flynn. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like right down there. It does a ton to help the channel. Thank you also to the members of the channel, which you can see right here. I really appreciate you. If you want to talk about the boom and bust system, I have this video over here which covers the dramatic declines of new games in recent memory and how it could be very difficult for games to deal with that going forward. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a wonderful day.